Welcome to ReReview, where we watch movies from our past with a perspective from today. Your hosts are Matt, Bobby, and Austin, and we still love the films from our youth, so we're looking back to see if they hold up. On this episode, we're discussing The Last Starfighter. It was released in 1984, directed by Nick Castle. It stars Lance Guest, Robert Preston, and Kay E. Kuter. This movie shows us what happens when you are really good at video games. Now, this is a fair warning. We're spoiling a 40-year-old movie, so if you haven't seen it, we will be revealing key plot points. I'll change it before we get into it. I do want to ask Bobby, what do you look for in your science fiction-related films? What are the things that you're hoping to see when you watch a sci-fi type movie?
I mean, that's a tough question because sci-fi films really stretch a huge gamut of all sorts of different things. I mean, I guess what I'm most interested in is just a memorable experience. Is that vague enough for you?
I'll take your vague answer. Matt, what do you look for in your sci-fi films?
Well, I have a little bit more time to have thought about it compared to Bobby. So thank you for going to Bobby first.
What the heck? Come on.
I mean, if I look at the ones that stand out in my mind, I think it's the ones that kind of challenge me in a different way than I expect, I guess. They come at, the world from a different point of view. So it makes me kind of think. I'm all for like the high tech type stuff, but I feel like those ones kind of come a dime a dozen. Whereas like, I feel like the ones that really actually kind of made me think and kind of pushed some boundary are the ones that tend to stick out the most to me. Like, you have a movie that's super high tech and super futuristic, but then like, I'll really enjoy a movie like Primer, obviously there's like the Star Wars and the Fifth Elements and stuff like that. But I think the ones that really stick out to me are ones that kind of push something that I never really thought about before, which I kind of feel like is the crux of science fiction is, beyond now, right?
Right. Let's take some kind of interesting political idea or some kind of other idea and like twist it into an entertaining story.
At least a forward-facing one, I think.
I love both of your answers for many reasons, and I think any sci-fi fan will line up with that. But you know what I like? I like tropes and doing things where you can predict everything that's happening, and I like really bad CGI. So leave me alone, and let's talk about The Last Starfighter.
Yeah, let's do it.
What would it be like to grow up in a town where... let me paraphrase it. Not a town, but a trailer park. And the people in this town support you so much that you can play an arcade game and there's immense joy that no town has ever seen before. Please tell me that you want to live in this place like I do.
I was borderline waiting for it to turn out that this place was actually a cult or something. Like they all were like, oh, society won't accept our religion. So they ran away and they're like the religion of the arcade case, I guess, or something, the cabinet.
We meet our character Alex Rogan, right? Who is our last Starfighter, spoiler alert. But I think the main thing here is that you were surprised, Bobby, that he was the last Starfighter.
I mean, to be honest, Bobby was surprised by Titanic. He was like, what?
Come on, man.
What?
Hey, in my defense, whenever a movie says the last of something or a TV show says the last of something, they're never actually the last of it. Turns out somehow they had a whole bunch of them. Or whatever that TV show was. It's like the last dude on Earth or whatever. There's like millions of them.
Oh, Last Man on Earth. Yeah.
It's like, yeah, no, not so much.
I can tell you don't like the word last in your titles. Well, we meet Alex and it's a very like odd character because where our introduction is, we see him playing Starfighter to begin with, right? We kind of get introduced to some of the side characters, and then Alex is already at the arcade machine playing this game. And I think this is where we get our first introduction to, I think I'll say, very interesting elements of how they wanted to present the video game to us, between sort of an on-screen full CG effect to a over-the-shoulder, like videotaping the CRT, and you get really different presentations of the game. if I'm not mistaken, we might have all, well, maybe Matt and I don't know about you, Bobby. I felt kind of impressed with the CG when they went full screen because this is 1984 and we were like, this is like Nintendo 64 quality CG we're looking at. That seemed pretty good.
I was just thinking they just took like some of the shots that they made for the actual like battle scenes and then just kind of reworked them a little bit for the video game, and that's
pre-textured and lighting.
You ruined it for me just now. It's absolutely what they did. Dang it. Alex plays Starfighter, and he seems like he's okay with it. But he also seems like he surrounded himself with people. Let me qualify. The town loves him, and we'll get to that. But the people who are his friends are not his friends. Would you agree?
Yeah, that's the most awkward friend group I've ever seen.
I'm going to make something of myself.
I think the Zulu.
Not like you losers.
No, the Zulu should have just killed them all. Or whatever that thing was.
It was definitely an odd sort of setup of, and I think I felt this throughout the entire thing between all the characters. There was just, there was enough of a disconnect, I think, for everyone in a way. Like, you're like, oh, this is supposed to be a family. And what about my grandma? Do you really care about your grandma? I don't know that you do, right?
Mm-hmm. I mean, so here's my impression of the movie. And I know anyone who loves this movie or has like a very like nostalgic attachment to this movie. Me. I don't know why, but as the movie was going, I was like, did they just go with the first take every single go? Because like it feels like they're like somebody has a cue card off to the side and they're reading off of it. It was like, oh no, he got shot. That's terrible. I mean, it's not The Room bad. Don't get me wrong. There is an attempted acting, but it feels like, you know, the director wasn't really going to the level of trying to get any real emotions out of anyone. And I get it. Like the director played Michael Myers in all the movies or whatever. So like he didn't have a ton of directing experience going into this, and starting with the sci-fi movies, probably not the best route to go. But at the same time, like just needed a couple more takes, I think. A little bit more refinement, because otherwise the relationships kind of felt a little bit hollow to me.
Yeah, I think that was definitely that disconnect. Again, my favorite part at the beginning there was me cheering over this fascination that, okay, so he gets to play Starfighter for real, and all of a sudden he's racking up a high score, and I feel like at that point he kind of stopped ish and he's just watching the score go up somehow, even though he's not playing. But then it turns into, hey everyone, come and watch him beat the high score, and all of a sudden you just get this epic scene of all the townspeople like, we have to watch you win at this game. And all I could think is, I was like, I love that everyone is into video games. I would not believe that something like this exists before.
In my mind, they all played and they all had a tournament and they were all doing it all the time. And then slowly over time, they all just stopped playing it and he's the only one that kept playing. That's why they're so invested in it.
I actually love this backstory. I do.
But, like at the same time when earlier in the movie, when like, so we see him for the first time, Alex playing the video game. I just remember thinking, I was like, okay, one lady's over here complaining her electricity's out, but this game's just going the entire time.
No, it totally is. But she's the same one who's rocking. She had like a portable cassette player, right? She was listening to some music, and they're like somehow a tech forward trailer park.
I don't know why, but it kind of reminded me. I don't know if you guys ever saw the movie. We probably need to watch it on here at some point. But they reminded me of the Tenants and Batteries Not Included, the movie.
Okay,
like just a random eclectic mix of like people that don't quite make sense, because I've been to trailer parks that were like this, and I was like, none of these people actually exist. Maybe in 83, 84 they did, but this is like somebody was just like probably writing down people that grew up in their neighborhood in like Ohio or something, and then just started creating characters based off that. But it makes no sense for the people who actually are living there.
So I have a question for you guys. Why do you think they decided to make characters for the people that live there instead of just like show him and he's playing a video game and that there's a girl, and not just show the rest of them the background? Why like quote unquote waste any screen time on any of their lines, like getting to know them at all. Like,
damn, Bobby.
My initial response,
I mean,
cut them all out.
Like, cut them with Will Wheaton. Get them out of there.
I'm serious. Like, do you think it grounds the movie in some kind of like, look, like this is what he's fighting for because the Conan Armada could potentially.
Well, okay, hold on. Let me go by first. I want to say, because my view, and it's not necessarily answering your why. It feels so 80s to me. Like, it feels like TV 80s shows. We watched Flight of the Navigator, and it gives me that same type of vibe. Like, there's this just.
It did feel like Gremlins 80s, a little bit like that.
Yeah, that too. It felt in its place and its time, but I totally agree with your cutting everyone out simultaneously. Go ahead, Matt.
I mean, I don't really have an explanation as to the reason why I think that they're there. I think that either one of two things happened. Either because this is kind of harking back to the thing I was talking about during. It was like, why are we on Earth so much? Like, why are we following Robo Alex as much as we're following him, considering the stories out there? And you're right, it doesn't tie in. It's not like the townspeople get together and they wire up the one dude's antenna or whatever to send a signal to Alex in order to give him a beacon or something to find Earth again. Some moment that would have made it worth focusing on them. The only thing I could think of is he wrote the story, saw the budget that he couldn't afford Star Wars, and was like, well, I guess I'm just gonna have to film on Earth for a good chunk of it then. And we got what we got. I mean, you said it is very 80s.
I read that it was a result of a test screening and that they thought that the Beta Alex stuff was funny, so they added more of it.
What?
Those damn test screeners. Strike again.
I can't even comprehend that.
More Robo Alex, less Starfighters.
I mean, I don't know what was added. Maybe it was the part where he like takes off his head and that was the part that was added, but that's what I read.
Demanding more Robo Alex, and we can get into this, is a very interesting choice. And you said it couldn't be Star Wars, Matt, but I'm telling you, looking at the CG, this feels like a very expensive computer budget. I'm not going to lie. I felt like they probably had to cut in other ways because of some of those CG shots. I was going, this is like a high polygon model for 1984. I'm very confused. When we think of the tech, and in particular, what I'm talking about for that polygon model is we get introduced to what's his name? Hold on, I got it.
Centauri.
Yeah, Centauri.
He only said it 5,000 times during the movie.
I know. You can tell how much I cared about him. All of a sudden, he drives up in this like bunk DeLorean,
the Pentolorian.
Like, it was a futuristic car, futuristic in some big quotes. And I will admit, when the car drove, I liked the sound that it made. It seemed very electric car inspired in a way. But we meet Centauri, and his whole thing is, you are so good at this video game that you will be a starfighter. And you must come with me. And we all kind of went into this is a bit creepy. Don't get into this man's car.
I just realized off that premise, I play way too much Call of Duty. I should stop playing just in case I get drafted.
Well, I think I mentioned this was an arcade machine, right? But clearly there was a modem or some kind of communication device in it. I was like, oh, I guess that's good for 1984. But we can get into Robo Alex here because there's basically a robot clone that needed to electrify, touch the skin of its host or what it was going to imitate to create an exact copy of it. And I think one of the most memorable shots in the film comes from this creature. It kind of actually reminded me of the show Fringe, who after it kind of found the person it wanted to mimic has to go through a transformation process. So it's under the bed. And Maggie, the girlfriend, walks in and does not uncover the sheets. And I kind of wanted to see the horror movie if she had opened up those sheets to see what was happening underneath it.
That was kind of a weird... Maybe that came from his experience on the Halloween movies. Maybe he wanted to have kind of like almost like a jump scare.
Yeah, that was a total jump scare for me moment when I was younger. watching this movie. Oh yeah.
It could be. I could see it being nightmare fuel. That was kind of creepy. I was like, that kind of stood out a little bit.
Yeah, the way the face was kind of sucking in on itself, then blowing back out.
The translucent flesh and the eyeballs staring at you. Yeah. No, I could see that. If I was walking down an alley and that showed up, nope, turn around.
But in this time, simultaneously, he's in the car with Centauri. Alex is in the car with Centauri, and they're going 303 maybe miles per hour. I guess they're in LA, right? So sure. And eventually take off and fly and, are in the stars, and things get really, really weird because Alex was kind of aloof the whole time, right?
All things considered, yeah. So
he didn't ask the right questions at the right times.
I mean, was he on something at the time or something to kind of, because first off, he was going 300 miles an hour. He didn't seem to really care too much about that. And then for some reason it had to drive to take off, I guess, because then it goes interstellar and goes through an entire galaxy in like 2 seconds.
Very fast moving machine through a wormhole.
Yeah.
And this is where we get to see more of that CGI that we both questioned while Austin simultaneously loved it somehow.
I guess it could have been worse. It could have just been like string lights and they just spun the camera. Moved it through it.
We'll talk about the spinning part. That was really, really awesome. He gets to this, it was called the Frontier, which is kind of like a battle station, learns that there are multiple starfighters that have been recruited to
an alien
be
species.
At war. Yeah, he was the odd one out, right? In terms of, well, sorry, I'm being a humanist now. He was the odd one out because it was the only human. He sadly did not have a pair because all the other ones were paired up with a corresponding other partner. I was like, oh, I thought maybe they'd bring another human in and it would make the story more interesting, and they did not. Maybe that was something else they chose to cut. But we think of the tech, and as they go through, he's introduced to characters that he can't understand. And then I note down they have a babblefish, right? That he can wear on his lapel, and all of a sudden he can understand all the languages.
Yes.
Can we get that too, please?
Yes.
I need it.
That would have actually been a great, I know it's a completely random thought, but it would have been a great payoff if they would have had somebody who didn't speak English in the trailer park. And when he comes back at the end, he could perfectly understand him. And he was like, good luck, Alex. Really so just some little moment would have been great like that.
But because we talk sci-fi and ultimately this was a movie about politics, right? Somehow. It was a movie about a group of people who are having infighting because the sun has defected and is now the ultimate enemy in the name of Zur. And he made a great floating head entrance. I will tell you, I was very happy with this dissolve in CGI effect into this floating transparent head that they were somehow all talking to. I was here for all of that.
I guess I was going to ask you guys, no. The effect itself was fine for the most part or whatever. It kind of reminded me of a couple other movies around the same time that similar, because like he did that whole bobbing left to right, looking around type thing or whatever. I was just going to ask you what you thought about Zur, like in that moment and then later on, because like I feel like, I mean, like most movies, you can't judge it, purely off the protagonist. You have to base it off the antagonist as well. And like, I felt like his introduction there wasn't too bad, especially with the whole head melty sequence that occurs, that I was like, wow, this movie is probably PG, and it didn't this was like pre Gremlins and everything else that get that to PG-13. But like later on, he became like a whiny Targaryen, later on it felt, but that introduction was pretty good. And then it just kind of went downhill from there for him.
Right.
It probably ties more to the vision of what was desired and the execution maybe not landing in that same space.
No,
I think there's a lot of I think, Matt, at one point you questioned if this was a comedy or if they were taking this in a sincere presentation of the story that they're telling. And my response was, are you sure it's not a comedy? There's a little bit of Spaceballs to this, right?
Well, I mean, if this was on the same level as like Doctor Who, where it's like that tongue in cheek and, I feel like if they would have approached it that way, I honestly believe they're being 100% serious with this movie. They thought it was probably going to be the next Star Wars or Star Trek.
Oh,
and I don't think that they were aware of what they were doing. Like somebody was watching those dailies and wasn't quite putting, one and one together there.
The hate.
Okay, all right, but I'm saying that in the sense that like I feel like you can watch these kind of movies now and they're, at least from my perspective, they're so bad they're good type category where like you can get away with that kind of level of acting. Cause like I'm a huge fan of movies like Logan's Run, right? Where like, it's the acting was just so far, because like in a lot of ways, I feel like that's what they thought the future might be like, whenever they do those kind of movies. And maybe that's what they were doing kind of here too, where it felt like a lot of the acting, a lot of the stuff is very melodrama in the way they're doing stuff. And from that perspective, I get it and I appreciate it, whatever, but I'm kind of worried that they were trying to be Star Wars or try to be something a little bit more serious.
Well, I mean, it definitely has the same structure or very similar structure as Star Wars. And there's a lot of, I mean, it's really hard to make a sci-fi movie like this and not be compared to Star Wars. And I think maybe that's why one of the cool things about this is that they did the stuff in CG, right? It makes it look so different than a lot of the other stuff that's 80s space battle sci-fi stuff.
There's a balance of, I think we kind of at one level wanted models because we know what a model can do and the impression a model gives, especially when they play with size and the perspective. And here it was just definitely just CG through and through. Again, I was still kind of a fan of it. Quickly though, the bad guys are involved. Zur's the main bad guy. He's working with some other alien creatures that want to blow stuff up. Eventually, Alex says, "I don't want to be a starfighter." Comes back to Earth. All the other starfighters get killed, and hence the movie title is presented to us because he needs to now be the ultimate rescuer, our savior of Earth and the entire galaxy. The Last Starfighter.
Are we ignoring there were only like 8 starfighters? Anyways, like I saw the last scene with all of Rylos. There were people there. It's not like Galaxy Quest where there are only like 100 people left in the entire planet. They had people. Why? Like I kind of get the feeling, especially when you look at
there were so many. Yeah, but they didn't score 900,000 on the video game.
Okay, but here's my thing though. The Rylosians, whatever their names are, they're the ones with the foreheads, right? Those are the people from Rylos. I don't think there was a single starfighter from them, but there was a bunch of other alien starfighters. I'm starting to think they were conscripting people from other planets so they didn't have to fight their own wars.
I do agree with that. I thought that immediately, that it was odd that they don't have their battles themselves, and they definitely had like a mantra or a cadence they wanted everyone to use. But didn't they say like to death or something along those lines?
Victory or death, yes.
Yeah, they're using victory or death, but they're not fighting.
Yeah.
What if this whole movie turns around that they were actually the bad guys? Like they had enslaved all these planets and that's how they brought in. And it actually turned out that Zur was actually the good guy.
Oh no.
Damn, I want that version.
Also very plausible.
Yikes.
He comes back. I forgot the other character he was working with, but we have sort of his starfighter mentor. Is that a good way of looking? Is that Greg?
Greg, yeah. Uh-huh.
What an odd character who I thought was navigating and or flying the ship so he can rotate the turret, but then at times he was the one responsible for dodging, but then sometimes Greg was. I was confused about who was actually in charge of running that ship.
Well, it seemed like Greg was the guy who did like the functional controls, and the other guy, Alex, did shooting and other stuff, but they seem like they had like capabilities to be able to do whatever they needed to
certain
do.
Things.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. How'd you feel about the space dogfighting? And what if you don't compare it to Star Wars? Okay, what if you just pretend Star Wars doesn't exist? How do you feel about the space dogfighting?
Should I also remove Star Trek and every other competent?
Yes,
Star Battle?
Go on, come on, remove it.
Like, how far do we need to go down before we're? So okay, and I know I'm coming off as a hater. I get it. I totally understand that for the time, and just reading up on the specs. And I mean, I went to school and did CG animation or whatever. So like, I get how difficult it is. And, you know, in early 2000, when I'm doing mine, it probably was on par with this when I started out or whatever. So I'm like, I get the difficulties of the whole thing and how hard it is to really convey action at that, you know, back during that time or whatever. So I totally appreciate how hard it was to do what they were doing. Mm-hmm. But man, you remember that scene in Austin Powers where the dude, like, he's driving the steamroller and the dude's like, no, and then it does a wide shot and he's like 10 feet, like 10, 20 feet away. That's what it felt during all these dogfights. When those missiles slowly flew by, I was like, wow, those are the slowest missiles I've ever seen. Oh, you couldn't have sped it up just 3 times, guys. They're like, we don't have blur.
I don't think they have the FPS budget, nor the motion blur, nor the ambient occlusion we were looking for. Anything to add some shaders. Make the CGI just pop a little more.
Sorry, your 1983 computer wasn't there for you.
I mean, that's where I still feel like it was, because I'm very impressed with what they did.
I think in the 90s, I still had a computer that was like black with orange letters or whatever. Like, how they did this, like, I have no idea.
We probably need to get into some behind the scenes here on that CG production to just get a full understanding of what they have going on. Ultimately, Alex does some battling, does some sneaky stuff, takes out a turret, is somehow the best starfighter there is.
Kind of easy to be the best when you're the only one.
You're not wrong. He really wasn't his job after this to go recruit more. He's like, look at how good I am. Come with me.
Get it.
That seems that would be the path he should take, at least. We quickly talked about it. How do we feel about all the alien characters? From both the ones that were gonna be starfighters to eventually like our what do we call our friend with the eyes on the side and the mouth in the middle? How do you feel about the designs they chose?
I don't know about the designs, but the execution wasn't bad. I think that for the most part, like the makeup on the Rylusians or whatever, I think was pretty solid. Like we're watching this in high resolution, which they probably never really intended people to see as high resolution as we were probably seeing it being remastered and everything. Mm-hmm. I think that the makeup and stuff held up pretty well. I think that the alien costumes held up decently. They never got too close. The assassin design wise, did it really make a lot of sense why somebody went to an aquarium and was like, a hammerhead shark. But what if the eyes were down at jaw level instead?
Right.
So it was in a perfect line.
Yeah.
It looked interesting. That's for sure. But it wasn't bad. I mean, honestly, I've seen way worse. Honestly, I've seen worse aliens in Star Wars. So no, it wasn't bad.
Those are fighting words.
No.
Go to that cantina scene and tell me that there's not a couple questionable choices in there. I get they just went to the costume department and got some werewolf costumes or whatever, but some of them don't hold up as well as most of these did. So
yeah, he fights the aliens and he comes back to Earth, I guess, with that success. And once again, the townsfolk are, hey, you showed back up. There was a whole scene with robot Alex who can't make love to his girlfriend and eventually commits he unalives himself to make sure that the proper Alex doesn't get caught. Whatever. If we get back home, and his goal is to take Maggie away from planet Earth. Did you ever believe in their love? Did you? Tell me you did. Someone?
I mean, he's got the ability to go back and forth, right? Like visit grandma, take grandma with him on a subsequent trip. It's not like it's a one-way ticket, right?
It kind of felt one way to me.
It did feel that way. And then as soon as you said that, I was like, oh yeah, they can just go back whenever they want to. They can go through wormholes like it's nothing.
Right. Just